Welcome, everyone. My name is Federico Tozzi from the Italy America Chamber of Commerce. I'm here with our president, Alberto Milani. This is the fifth edition of our annual luxury summit, and I'm particularly happy to be here at the Innovation Center of KPMG, our event sponsor. We will have like four panels today. Alberto is going to guide us through all those panels. And I would like to take this opportunity, first of all, to thank everybody for participating, but also thanking our sponsors, KPMG in Primis, Jedora, Greenberg Taurik, the Viscusi Group, Cloud4We, and our media partner, Fortune Italia Magazine, also is responsible for a very interesting panel directly from Italy. So I'm not going to take too much of your time. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. I apologize for some technical difficulties that we experienced at the beginning of this event. And I would like to give the floor to Alberto.
Good morning, good afternoon to everybody. This is a pleasure for us to be here at KPMG Innovation Center. This is when you define innovation, you define disruption, and you define uncharted territories, which is basically what we have this particular time in our life. So what we're going to go through today are different aspects of what is changing in our life, personal point of view, on a business point of view, for all of us. And we have great speakers. We have different topics that we would like to cover, and each of us will try to share with you and give you at the end of the panel a takeaway tip that you can go home with. You could use it whether or not in your personal life or in a business point of view. So I would say that this is the fifth one. As Federico was saying, it's becoming more and more important. It's becoming more and more deep in terms of contents. And this is the first time that we had a broad international audience. We have people connected from all over the world.
Good morning, good afternoon, maybe good night in some parts where you are. Buongiorno, buonasera. When I talked with Alberto Milani and the team at the Italy America Chamber of Commerce about connecting creativity, sustainability, and luxury, I couldn't expect two things. One, that I would have the availability of these three incredible panelists that we have today, not only because they're leaders in their field, but also because, just like an Akira Kurosawa film, they bring three different perspectives to the same film, to the same movie. It's great. It's great. I think it's going to be great. What also I didn't really remember, maybe, and that's my fault, was this is the week of the Glasgow Climate Summit. And we're going to talk about that a little bit too. Some people have said good news, bad news summit. And some have said too little, too late. But the panelists are more experts than me about talking about this. I will get to them, and I'm going to be very brief on their bios, because their bios could take up a lot of time. So Susan Rockefeller is a documentary filmmaker, artist, conservationist. She's founder of Musings, a digital magazine that showcases responsible innovation. She sits on many boards, from Oceana to Stone Barn Center for Food and Agriculture, We Are Family Foundation, Asian Cultural Council, and the David Rockefeller Fund. She's also a member of the Council of Foreign Relations and member of the film committees of MoMA and the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Science. She's also an accomplished painter and a beekeeper in the Hudson Valley, so we'll talk about that. Michael Beutler joined Kering in 2011 as Director of Sustainability Operations. He was before at SAP for 6 years in senior management. He also worked at international corporations, DHL, PwC, and Ford. Michael's really been one of the first to enter as an executive in the field of sustainability in the luxury world. And he's been integral in actually making Kering's operations of comprehensive sustainability strategy, creating cross-cutting innovative approaches to reduce the environment impact from all Kering brands. Thanks to Michael, Kering has been recognized by external rating agencies and publications for its excellence in their sustainability programs. And last but not least, for sure, Michele Sofisti, who I've had the fortune to work with for many years. And his background is quite unique too. A degree in geology led him to a position of head of the German market for Ferrari. He'll explain that perhaps later. And he subsequently worked as CEO at Swatch Group as CEO of Omega and Swatch. He also has worked at Kering as managing director of Gucci Watches and Gerard Perregaux. And he has changed direction. He changed course direction. And now he devotes himself full-time to the world of sustainability as head of global partnerships at Resolve, an NGO based in Washington that finds innovative solutions for critical social, environmental, and health issues. And also Michael sits on many boards, including the Council of Advisors. He sat on the Council of Advisors at the National Geographic. The reason I was saying it's kind of like a Kurosawa film with these different perspectives is exactly what I wanted. Susan Rockefeller as an individual has had a huge impact on leaders in the luxury world and brands. Michael Beutler has been truly one of the first top executives to guide the luxury brands. And Michele Sofisti has actually went from luxury brands to sustainability. So in that sense. So I want to ask all my panelists, and sorry I was a little bit long with the introductions, sustainability has gone from being an issue which was an occasional issue on the forefront of luxury companies to being a driver, not only of initiatives, but also of organizational moves. Kering has been one of the first to recognize this, and many industries, groups, and brands have followed. So what happened in this relatively short time to make this seismic switch in brand thinking in the luxury world? And I'll start with Susan.
As you mentioned, we are dealing with Glasgow and COP26, and we all know we're in crisis. And the key is really to execute on so many of the promises that we're making towards this zero waste circular economy. But I do think that, in addition to COVID, many of the things that I think were a big motivator for companies had to do with sort of this surge of interest in ocean waste and plastic pollution, and the role of microplastics as part of a larger fossil fuel problem, and the role of plastics in clothing and waste. So I think that the power of media, and probably Michele could talk a little bit about this, and I certainly can through film and my digital newsletter, but the power of media to shed light on these issues, and especially to lift up women in regard to fair wages and safe working conditions. That has just been key as part of the illumination of fairness and what's needed in the global supply chain. And I'd also say that, much of food and fashion comes from seeds. Like food, as well as fashion, we're asking ourselves, where does our food come from and who made our clothes? And it all starts with resources from our earth and learning to account for the true cost of these resources. So, I do think COVID-19 illuminated the biodiversity loss and the recognition that these extractive resources that we're using for our way of life is killing biodiversity and the health of our planet. And also the recognition along with COVID was the horrible and tragic killing of George Floyd. And I think that was really pivotal to a massive change needed in how we see ourselves and others through the lens of social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that all together, I think, has contributed to this mass shift in brand awareness and self-reflection and re-examination of delivering content and commerce in this digital world with a greater consciousness of our global connectedness. So I think it's a really interesting time, and I think brands have a great opportunity to be imaginative and creative. And I think also what Julia mentioned about the metaverse and the incredible possibilities of the virtual world will be key as we imagine our future and the future of fashion and luxury.
Thank you, Susan. Michael?
Well, I'm trying to think, what didn't Susan say that I could say?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna try to build on that. So I think one thing really interesting is in this digital age, we have awareness. We tend to be very in the moment with news. And one of the interesting things, or not interesting, the reality of climate change, or all these points that Susan touched on, whether it's inclusion, whether it's climate, whether it's biodiversity, is these are created by action over time. And one of the key challenges, and this is also a challenge in fashion, because fashion is not something that's known as like cathedral kind of thinking, or you're building over centuries. You're going from collection to collection. It tends to, the mindset seems to, the thing, something is very cool and trendy, and then it isn't, and it's something else. A designer's hot, then they're cold. So, one of the challenges is, how do you, I think of like a Swiss watch, just for Michele's sake, but it really is true. You have little gears and you have big gears, and little gears are spinning fast, and that's the cycle of fashion. And then the big gears are like these mega trends that are super important, and now are unprecedented in their scale, and I think the awareness because of social media. So social media has been an accelerator, but it also tends to dumbify us a bit in terms of the news cycle, because what happened 2 years ago, people kind of forget. So that's one of the challenges in fashion, I think, is how do you bring a longer term, more process-based, more science-based mindset to an industry that traditionally, and I started my career in automotive, all surrounded by engineers, super process-based. I can say working in fashion was probably the other end of the spectrum, in that it's not so process-based. It's very quick thinking. It's if something's off if this shirt, if the collar's off a millimeter, who knows? Who cares? But with components in an automobile, it doesn't work, and there's consequences to it not working. So it's interesting, just when we look at how you kind of apply all these real science, whether it's social science or I'll say I don't want to say hard science, but climate science. When you try to apply these things into a world that it is really works in a different language and tempo, it's a challenge. So one of the key things is try to measure, is try to demystify. And that's the other interesting thing. I work for a luxury group. Luxury is about mystification, because the mystification creates the margins. The mystification creates the loyalty. The mystification creates these following and trends and phenomenons and social media buzz and all that stuff. So you really want mystification on the one hand, but on the other hand, when it comes to sustainability, you need to demystify. And so it's a very interesting process to go about trying to do that in a context where mystery has created enormous value and potential of an industry and of a whole sector and of a whole way of life too. So I think it's an interesting time to try to challenge paradigms. You're trying to challenge a way of doing things. You have to do it in a way, because as much as intellectually we like to see the economy shift over quickly to this sort of new economy, net zero economy, the reality is things don't work that way. And change tends to be much slower. If I've observed anything, even a leading group like Caring, where we've had the support of our chairman and CEO for the entire 10-year journey I've had, the process of change, the pace of change, is a slow pace of change. And that's okay, as long as I've heard said, as long as you're moving the ball forward. It's more of a football metaphor. You got to just keep the ball moving. You got to keep moving forward. You do that, you score. But it's a challenge to move it forward. And I think it's incumbent on all of us too, as you know, I wear a hat as I'll say executive in a big group, but also as a citizen, also as a consumer, also as a father, as a husband, and all these different roles need to kind of come together to say, how do we create a society of the future that's really going to sustain us? And I sometimes really shy away from the word sustainability, because I love to have it that we don't have a panel on sustainability. It's just part of what we talk about. We're not there yet, though. So it's great to have this discussion today, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to really kind of reflect on, okay, what kind of choices do I make as a consumer? What kind of questions can I ask when I go into a boutique? Do I ask, like, where is this made from? What's the footprint? And even if no one has the answer today, and in some cases they will, maybe some cases they won't, if people ask the question, then we'll start to have answers. And we're seeing that more on the investor side. We're seeing that in many different aspects, I think, of our stakeholders are asking those questions in the fashion industry, but we need to do that as citizens as well.
That's great. Michele, how do you see things, since you've been on both sides of the pond, so to speak, or the oceans, the luxury world and now the sustainable environmental world?
First, thank you, Venanzio, for the introduction, and thank you, the Italo-American Chamber of Commerce, for inviting me. It's really extraordinary to be here. So my thinking, I try to add something, is honestly, I believe that worldwide there is a growing consciousness about environmental issues and about what we need to do, and that we are really running in a certain sense also out of time. And this is probably driven by the younger generations. So we have seen also in these days in Glasgow, there is a push. That push also comes to the product that the luxury industry is creating and producing with much more attention on what this younger generation is asking for. To me, what is still missing, with all respect, and of course is different industry by industry, company and groups by groups, but is we have not yet done a switch. We are moving into the right direction more and more, but there is not a switch. And I think this is also linked to the fact that the situation is very complex, not easy to understand. And there is not a common ground point. I make an example. The only global issue that the world has been able to solve has been in the 80s, the ozone hole. Why that? Because the ozone hole was an immediate problem. You have to solve that because otherwise people were seriously getting sick. While when we talk of climate change or even more biodiversity, is not something of, is getting like every day a problem, but is not something for today, it's something for tomorrow. And is natural behavior of a human being to kind of push a little bit on the side. But this has consequences. And if I take the absolutely very important words of Susan about COVID, yes, COVID has brought a first drama in the world, but we need also to understand that conspiracy aside, that COVID is the result of deforestation. COVID is the result of the fact that we go interact in a bad way with the nature, and as many other pandemic and sicknesses from the centuries, they come from this world. So we needed to approach in a more respectful way. So to me, what we need today, luxury and other industry, is really a complete understanding of the urgency. And as much as I love it when Michael says we need to go the good direction, whatever path, I think that now we need to speed up, honestly. And this is also what we should, or at least I wish will come out from Glasgow, is that we need to speed up. The Paris Agreement, only 10% has been kind of committed. In '92, Rio program, the very first climate meeting, where already a 12 years old girl, Suzuki, daughter of scientist David Suzuki, she said exactly the same thing that we listened from Greta. So that's why I'm saying speed is of essence. Speed and time are of essence.
That's great. First of all, I want to remind our viewers that I am taking questions, so you have this incredible panel. Please take advantage of it. I do want to jump on what Michele mentioned, and is the switch happened, or are we going to have to wait for, as Julia mentioned in her initial remarks, for the Generation Z in 2035 to be buying 50% of luxury products, or almost 50% of luxury products, or the switch happened? And I'll start actually with Michael.
Well, I want to say yes, but I think it's underway. And a lot of things are happening in luxury right now. First of all, the very definition of luxury, I think, is changing. What the new generations want is not necessarily what I would have called luxury in the old sense, which was the craftsmanship, the timelessness. It's changed a bit. It's migrated a little bit more toward fashion. And even a very famous CEO in our group has recently said of our very largest brand that he sees Gucci as more of a fashion brand, because it's leading consumer taste trends. It's not, like this. It's not like one's parents' tastes that are being continued and somewhat changed incrementally. It's very much, taste making and rapid and social media, and so I think we're already seeing a change right now. Now the question is, does that change go in a good direction or a bad direction? Because it could go in a bad direction. You have the buy it, wear it once mentality, do an Instagram, then who cares what happens to it? That's one way to do it. Another is, can we make this a driver of change? Can it be that this engine of taste making is fueled by sustainability, and you're seeing some caring brands like Gucci doing more and more in terms of not only communicating on that, but embedding that within how they do collections. So is there a sea change yet? No. Is there, 10 years ago when I arrived at Kering, when we had the conversation with François, he's like, sustainability, we're like, yeah, of course, let's do this. And he saw the long-term vision. But when we talked to our brands, it was challenging, particularly on the creative side, to have the conversation. Now it's turned around. You have new, the design teams coming on. They're pushing, they're like, let's be vegan. Let's go for it. And it's now, it's now the roles reversed. We're saying, well, we can, but we need to consider that. But I think some of the key drivers of change are there. The question is also being, if I was answering this question maybe 20 years ago, I may have been more idealistic. Sometimes things can be so obvious, yet we don't take the action. We've known about climate change now since the 70s, to be honest, since the 70s. So it takes a little time before we see real action. And again, I go back to a lot of the action comes from our wallet. It comes from the economic decisions we make. It comes from political decisions. I'm actually based in France, but sitting in New York at the moment. That has a very different context here. It seems a lot more politicized than when I left 10 years ago. But to say those decisions matter. Corporations can take action. I think there's a lot of people here that are in very important roles in a lot of different companies and organizations that I would say we all have a responsibility to be part of that. We know what the problem is. We know what some of the solutions are, and sometimes the solutions are not apparent. They're not as obvious as they may appear. And, I could go into long discussion, even the old question about paper versus plastic. Well, in the beginning, people said, oh, well, plastic, you can recycle it, it's great. Actually, paper is a lot better because it doesn't go in the oceans. But if we had that conversation 15 years ago, it would have been a significant discussion about which is better. So things can change with science, but we know where to act. In many cases, we know how to act. So we need to act. But we're not there yet until we do that.
Susan, do you agree with this?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I want to go back to sort of the whole notion of time. And, I feel like we are on our way, but I think there has been just a failure to grasp sort of a longer term time horizon. And if you think about sort of our 4.6 billion year history of the Earth, that gets you into the sense of deep time and what it means to be here for really a split second. And that, most of us live in this real short-sightedness. And I think that we have to address that before it's too late. That's essentially what's going on with the climate crisis. And I agree with what Michael's saying, that I think that we all have to come to the table and make choices, whether it's, personally, your individual choices. When you think about the choices you want to make, I was going to say, as a mother and a wife, and, the hope that my children will, move into and live into a future with, hopefully their families and their children. But I also feel like consumers are not necessarily the ones that will drive. It's not going to necessarily be the millennials that are going to drive the biggest change. I think that we are really looking at a moral and philosophical crisis, and that we need top-down leadership. So we need the CEOs that have a lot of power to drive this conversation, to be at the table, and we need policy leaders. That's why COP26 was so important. And the UN Secretary, Antonio Guterres, said that we are in this code red for humanity. And, I happen to say that we're in the apocalypse, like it is happening. We are in the boiling water, whether we know it or not. So I think we just need a new roadmap and a really sort of creative way to look at how to consume and produce and reinvent fashion. And I do think that the virtual will come in a really, really powerful way, in terms of the virtual reality and the metaverse. But I think that we're on our way, but we have a long ways to go. And I also agree with Michele that we have to accelerate this change, but also understand that as human beings, we tend to have a short-term memory, which is also what Michael had said as well. So I think there's sort of a dialectic of, yes, we're in a crisis. And there's also the saying, it's hard to wake people up that are pretending to sleep. Like, we know what's going on and people have to stay awake to it. And we all have to come together to work together to make the changes that are needed.
Fascinating and a little bit counterintuitive, where the consumer has a big role, but top-bottom leadership, both private and public, are very, very key. Michele, I want to ask you, you have traversed, truly meta-traversed perhaps, the world of luxury, being head of Omega watches, Gucci watches, Girard-Perregaux, and now you're working with NGOs. First of all, how has this translation been? How has this traversing been? And also, do these two worlds know how to speak to each other? I was fascinated by Michael before mentioning the fact that now it's the creative people going to the sustainability people and saying, let's be sustainable, let's go vegan, let's go plant-based. How do you see these two worlds speaking to each other?
Yeah, Venanzio, you know me very well. So I, being a geologist as a formation, and I worked also as a geologist in the first part of my career, I remained always very much attached to nature and to all of that. And also together we have done quite a beautiful project to protect biodiversity and indirectly also mitigate the climate change. So I cannot see me like switching from something to another thing. What I wanted to do is really to put all what I could in my, let's say, networking and my capacity as a manager and professional at the service of those causes. That's why now I'm fully concentrated in working with a few organizations about the circular economy, with an organization in South Africa to protect the wildlife through education. We work with 8,000 local children to teach conservation, to avoid the poaching and all these terrible situations, and with Resolve, of course, and different raw material, high technology, and so on. The conclusion, but it's not a conclusion because it's still something running, is we need absolutely both the NGOs and we need the private sector. We need the NGOs because NGOs are fully of knowledge, passion, scientists, causes, very clear where we need to go and invest. But they will not reach I would say the solution by themselves. They needed the private sector, and they need the private sector in two ways to me. One way is that, as Michael was mentioning, from designing products, luxury or not luxury, thinking in an environmental sustainable way, which is very, very important, which means supply raw material in a sustainable way. If I stay in my, let's say, watch and jewelry industry, gold and diamonds, they need to be sustainable now. There is no excuses. It's not possible. 3/4 of the world gold comes to be refined in Switzerland, but still the majority, there is no traceability. We don't know from where it comes, which is not nice. So that is what I call a switch. On the other sense, to me, very important, and thank you, Susan, for mentioning before, is communication. Because at the end of the day, who is going to make the change are, as Susan was saying, the leaders, the political leaders. But the political leaders alone, they will not do the change because they do something looking at their electors. Who are the electors? Are the citizens of the world. So they need to know. And iconic brands, as the brands Michael working with, or other brands around the world in different industry, have the power of communication. They can really, they can convince people, not only because of the quality of the product they do and the story and so on, but also because they know how to do that. And the private sector brands, they know how to come to the results. That's why joining forces, NGOs and private sector, that can bring the results, because it will increase the awareness about those causes, the problems, and the solutions, because there are all solutions are there, technology, innovation, all are there. So it's fundamental that these two words, they talk together, and many times they don't talk together for whatever reason. And that is my point, and the experience that I'm doing, I would say, daily.
I have a question from the audience. And what are the sustainable factors that are drivers for Generation Z? Please, I'll start with Susan on this. And
well, I would say that I have Gen Z millennial children, and 4, and so I tend to listen to see what they're focused on, and I think that there is the sense that affordability is a factor. So, for instance, my daughter doesn't really buy clothes. She does Rent the Runway, and she gets to pick 8 pieces of clothing that she wears monthly and has fun, sort of creating her wardrobe and her style in that manner. I think that what I have found is that, and also through my digital newsletter, where I reach about 10,000 sort of influencers and CEOs, and then over 100,000 women primarily, there's a real interest in clean beauty and clean food. And I think that there's more funding. Most of the disposable income tends to be on on better food and dining out and having more experiences with sort of celebrity chefs or cool drinks. And then I think that there's obviously the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and they may be fairly new to some people listening maybe today. But a lot of the young people, the millennials and the Gen Z, understand sustainability, and I think they actually are more aligned with some of the values of luxury in terms of the durability, the reuse, the value. At least that's what I'm seeing around me. I hope that's a good answer to the question.
Definitely. Michael, you did a little bit of football analogy. So welcome to New York. Welcome back to New York with moving the ball forward. I'm gonna sort of use another football analogy for you. Tell me what it's like in the huddle at Caring Sustainable offices on a Monday morning.
Well, okay. There's basically three possible topics that can happen. One is kind of the ongoing rhythm of things, because in a corporation, we have reporting, we have a cycle of things that we have to do. And there's ongoing activities that are, we're talking, how are we doing on this? What do we need for that? What are the roadblocks, et cetera, et cetera. Two is if there's a crisis. Crisis is something comes out in the media. Maybe there's a new rating. I saw one today. Sometimes ratings come out and they'll rate one of our brands, but they haven't really researched it. It's kind of a trick they do to get you engaged and say, hey, we're about to publish a rating about you on sustainability. And by the way, it's really low. And then we have to say, hey, we have to reach out to them. Hey, have you read this? Have you read that? Look at their questions, look at their criteria. That's another thing. And then third is, often we'll be talking about how do we move the needle? Like, how do we really move the ball forward in a more dramatic way? How do we change the game, if you will? And that's not quite so much, because the Monday morning, a lot of it is actually spent on the first thing, which is not, for all these, because I get lots of contacts online from people studying fashion, sustainability, and they think it's like I have this really glamorous, I'm looking at new materials every day and changing the mindsets out there, changing the fashion world. And a lot of it, like most people's jobs, is pretty mundane and boring, honestly. But you have to do that stuff. That's the stuff that, to use a football metaphor, it's a linemen that do the blocking that help the ball move forward. And a lot of the work we do is blocking. And if we do our job, no one knows. If we have a crisis, sure, then okay, then we got to step in. But if we're doing our job on a lot of stuff, we're moving the ball forward, but we're doing it in a way that's consistent. And that's the thing. I think people want the quick wins. People want, okay, here's a game-changing technology. We all want that. That's part of the technology myth. We're going to start using digital. Oh, we're going to have such savings in resources because we're not using trees. We're going to use a lot less paper. Guess what? Now we're mining all these rare earth metals. You have cobalt. You have this. You have that. So the point being, a lot of our work in sustainability is grinding, but that's actually where the action is. You got to have that so you can have the breakthrough. So it's a combination, but the brands want the breakthrough. It's not fun to talk about the grind.
For sure. Michele, just like Michael's brands are coming to him now with ideas for environmental solutions to products, you deal with a lot of scientists now at NGOs. Are they good communicators? Do they want to speak to luxury brands? And how is that communication happening?
No, absolutely. There are incredible people that you can listen for hours. I'm particularly, I would say, passionate and in touch with two of them. One is Eric Dinerstein, who is the scientific director at Resolve, and he has developed with Intel probably one of the most advanced technology today available in the world, which is a super micro camera with artificial intelligence which is basically the technological solution to protect the wildlife from poaching, protect livestock and predator at the same time without killing them, and protecting the forest. So basically, I would say in a micro camera, you have all answers to biodiversity protection and the climate change. And another scientist I would say I dialogue quite often is Telmo Pievani. He's a professor in Padova University, and he's talking about bioculture in the sense that there is a biodiversity, but there is also cultural diversity. And actually, we are losing also cultural diversity. There are about 6,000 languages spoken in the world. We are losing half of them because they are spoken in very native population inside the forest. And where you have richness in the cultural diversity, you have richness also in biodiversity. So these people are phenomenal. They are communicators. They write books and so on. But most of the case, again, I come also with 30 years of private sector experience. I think brands are much more efficient in communicating and going to the goal. And you know me, so I can make a personal example. I call myself the Fred Flintstone of technology, but I have 2 iPhone, 2 Mac, 2 iPads, and I move around like a technology guy. Why? Because a specific brand was able basically to convince me through communication and beautiful objects. So that's why, again, I think the power of brands and luxury brands is huge. It's fantastic.
Oh, that's great. I want to ask about. We have a few more minutes, so I will then we'll switch over to the next panel. Susan, you single-handedly influenced me much my thinking when I saw the film Mission of Mermaids over 10 years ago. But you also influenced me when I heard a podcast where you were speaking about we have to be very careful between what is truly sustainable and what is sustainable. And Michael actually kind of touched on that a little bit too, that sometimes we use too much the word. What were you talking about, and how do we distinguish the two?
Well, because I've been in this field for decades, I do think that the word sustainability is getting to be quite worn. And I do think it becomes a bit of, it's just more noise and actually more confusion. So I think, what needs to happen and what resonates is getting back to why I think we're having this panel. And it's really about asking the right questions, to be part of this creative renaissance, and asking what is luxury? What does it mean to be part of this creative renaissance? What is it we really need? And what is it that we value? And when you think about sustainability, it's, it's like our ability to sustainability. And I think it gets down to, asking the right questions about, how we want to look at and think about waste. What are we leaving for future generations? And then asking companies to really think through their value proposition and drill down on what they're selling and how they can reduce as much as possible the waste in their own system. So I think it's time that we think beyond sustainability to sort of a philosophy of how we want to live and think. And out of that creativity and innovation of thinking will come products and services that will be more disruptive and exciting for people to support. So I think there's an open road and a potential to unleash creativity for good. But like what Michael said, you've got to be in the ditches or like the roadblocks or whatever, the defense, the football analogy. Okay, kind of move it forward, and it's in the grit. It's sort of like no grit, no pearl. Like if you don't do the grit and the work, you don't get the benefit of the pearl. And so I think that we all have to do the work that's needed and also not be greenwashed. And I think it gets down to sort of what Michele was saying, the power of brands to actually I think in a way, simplify what they're doing. And, whether that's sort of, signing on to Imagine, Paul Pullman and Valerie Keller's organization that has the Fashion Pact, or B Corp, or certain certifications, but, looking at ways to better organize the work that's being done and amplify the processes and the journey, so that consumers can better understand that DNA of the brand.
This is great. I really, unfortunately, time is truly flew. And I just want to thank all three of you for being incredible panelists, Susan Rockefeller, Michael Beutler, and Michele Sofisti. It's truly an honor to have been moderated this panel. You probably needed a bit of a better moderator for what you've talked about, but hopefully our viewers.
Oh, you were great.
You're fantastic, Venancio.
Thank you too.
Always.
But I'm sure our viewers got a lot from this. Thank you very much. Ciao.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so we're back to try to understand how to a B2C experience will go nowadays. So we understood a different kind of contents that needs to be put on the marketplace. We understood a bit how to reach out to consumer, and we understood also how technology is affecting all of us. We made some comments about it, but at the end, the result is that each of us is able to become a broadcaster of himself. So we're moving to a situation where each of us is promoting our name, our brands, our company directly with no filters. And this is basically what is the title of the discussion that we're going to have with three major panelists. We'll have John, Chip, and Thierry. The reason why I mentioned them in that order, because John will talk about the strategy that in any situation will need to be prepared to go into the marketplace. Chip will talk about how to approach it on the technology point of view on internet and on social media and 360 degrees approach. And then we'll have Thierry that will share with us a point of view that is more related to the distribution model and how the distribution is a fact on that. So I'll ask to each of them to introduce themselves. We will start with John. John, go ahead.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon. I'm John Pierce, Chief Creative Officer of Hudson Rouge. And for those of you who haven't heard of Hudson Rouge, we're a relatively small luxury-focused marketing boutique. We're based in New York, but we have offices in Toronto, Mexico City, Detroit, and Shanghai. Our secondary office of size is in Shanghai, in the very important kind of center of Asian luxury marketing. And basically, we are different from the other panelists, which is great, because I think you're going to get a nice faceted sort of perspective on luxury. We build brands across all media. We call it channel agnostic because we have strategy, creative, media, PR, and social all under one roof. And we think that is really a great way to manage luxury brands. And you'll hear me talk about the consistency. So I've been there since the agency's founding. I have a background as a writer and a creative director. I've worked on other luxury brands like Johnny Walker and Westin Hotels and various banks. But I've been working with Hudson Rouge for 9 years, and our foundational client is Lincoln, the Lincoln Motor Company. and we were charged
Very good.
reinventing Lincoln for the American market.
Yeah, you did a nice job. Chip.
Good morning and afternoon, everyone. My name is Chip Smith. I'm the CMO of a brand new B2C online luxury jewelry provider, Jadora.com. I am sure our name is new to you, as we just launched our brand in New York on October 21st with a fashion and influencer press event. So we are brand new to the world. We've launched our brand online, and you'll see us very soon in the fashion pubs later this month. So I hope by this time next year you've heard of us and you're very familiar with us. To give you 2 cents on Jadora, Jadora is an invitation-only jewelry, watches, and gemstone marketplace. So we're having storefronts. We're bringing together familiar brands and emerging brands as well, designers, best-in-class manufacturers, to provide a one-stop shopping experience. So this is B2C for luxury goods. So we're excited to be on the panel today. I've already learned a lot this morning, and we're excited to share some of the ideas we have about how we're engaging with the luxury market.
Thank you. Thierry.
Buongiorno, buonasera. I'm very, very pleased to join you and all the distinguished panelists. In addition to running my consulting brand company, I've launched in 2015 a distribution company, and today we represent 14 fine European luxury brands in watches and jewelry in North America. And prior to that, I really started all my life in the luxury goods industry. I was a VP of marketing at Cartier back in the 80s. And then I ran companies like Christophe Silver, Chopard, and Levive Diamonds up until 2010.
Very good. Very good. So we will have a couple of questions for all of you. And as I said on the beginning, each of you will attack that questions according to pre, in between, and after. So we will go on the affluent consumers, and everybody, including them, was forced to adjust to the new normal. Now the luxury brand itself has to be able to reimagine themselves, especially when it comes to the B2C strategy and experience, I should say, because now it's a different game. Most of the techniques that we're using before are obsolete, and so we'd like to know your opinion about it. How a luxury brand should reimagine the B2C experience. John.
I'm going to start with one word, which is consistency. Because we approach things strategically, I think the very, very first thing a brand do is to identify its DNA, its reason for being, sort of the soul of the brand. And only when you do that successfully can you then interpret how you need to behave, how you need to show up at every touch point, from the place where you are attracting a customer on the website, to the way you market and your voice and how you appear, what brands you choose to partner with at events, and then also the retail experience. All of those touch points need to be extremely consistent, especially for luxury brands. I think that consumers today are so aware, and they're bombarded, of course, with so many images and messages that the best luxury brands are the ones that create that cachet and that consistency across all touch points.
Chip?
Well, I concur what John said about consistency across all the brands, but as the pandemic forced all retailers to really re-explore their digital experience, consistency is critical. Consistency is critical with the brand, but I think what's super important is that we leverage the asset that digital brings and e-commerce brings, and brings you all kinds of new opportunities to communicate with the customers in ways that maybe we weren't understanding before. So consistency is critical, but there's also new and unique ways to apply that consistent brand message through digital. So digital, we can do a much better job as we get digital savvy about targeting our customers. And we can also do a much better job about personalized and VIP experiences that are online that we couldn't do before. But the nice thing as we move luxury into digital, that we can provide that we really can't provide in an in-store experience is we can provide additional knowledge, volumes of knowledge about product, right? That you really can't do in an immediate in-store experience. We can bring expertise from people outside of just the people that are in the store and content. We can bring detail around products that you can't really get just in store. And we can bring more content than ever before, which allows you to create more of a wow experience, but it's a different experience. And so that's where I move a little bit away from John, in that the online experience needs to be consistent, but it can be very different in terms of what you can provide in terms of knowledge and expertise and information that you can provide through that experience that you can't do in store. So there are, a lot of people think of the negatives of taking luxury online, but there are also some positives that we need to think about that we can bring to the consumer in terms of research before they ever show up, and can come in as an educated consumer instead of an uneducated consumer. And that way it's more transactional.
Thierry?
Yes, the challenge is really to engage with the customer and to know your customer well enough that you can speak their language and respond to their aspirations. Consistency is key. Playing on all the different buttons to engage with them digitally or through a store is obviously the only way to sell a product. But at the end of the day, I think that what counts most is really this true luxury approach, not mass luxury approach, and really put yourself in the shoes of the customer, whether the customer is a final customer or a retailer who is about to place an order. And the only way to do that is really to have a empathy that you can acquire, in my opinion, only in the trenches. You cannot be a general in an ivory tower and think that you can win the war. You need to be, I would submit, a soldier in the trenches, whether you enter a store and show the merchandise and hope to get an order, or you are behind the counter and you actually talk to someone who is about to buy. Digitally, of course, the challenge is to duplicate this experience. But then again, it depends where how you define luxury. In my own field, it's really only watches and jewelry, where you really need to weight the product, to feel the product. It's not a fragrance, it's not a trip to the Maldives, which are all sorts of different luxury. It's not fashion. When I started at Cartier as a product manager before being a VP of marketing, we used to say, I remember my elders used to say, true luxury is true luxury and not mass luxury. Well, Cartier became a mass luxury brand. And also fashion is not luxury because, like Coco Chanel said, ce qui se démode n'est pas la mode. Donc, in English, what is becoming unfashionable can be fashionable one day, unfashionable another day. But when you look at the luxury brands and what they produce outside of the realm of fashion, it's really a philosophy and a statement, and the product speaks for itself. So at the end of the day, again, we need to engage with the customer on a very, very personal level. And to conclude, I would say that it's really one customer at a time.
Very good. So we move to the second point, which is how to eliminate any kind of point of friction in the new customer journey. So we can break it down between outreach and engagement, as Thierry said before, how to be relevant with the new content that are important to be credible enough, I should say. Technology is also forcing all of us to raise the bar and to become more, I should say, scientific in the digital interaction, and to avoid as much as we can point of friction, although by definition, technology could create some obstacle, and as we experienced at the beginning of the summit. So a cable that doesn't work, and unfortunately, until you fix the cable that you try a few minutes before, you create a friction. But I would say that this is something that needs to be experienced and judged and evaluated versus the benchmark of the expectation that the client will have. As you probably know, the summit is being recorded. It's going to be polished. It's going to be cleaned up, and it's going to be distributed in 81 countries. So it will become perfect, but there's a friction journey that needs to be considered to get there. John.
I love that subject, and Terry, also the word empathy is one that we use a lot. Understanding those pain points for an individual consumer requires that you really understand your consumer well. And I'll give you an example. We're doing some work now with the brand Citizen M, and they see themselves as affordable luxury. So maybe they're more mass luxury than true traditional luxury, but it's a modern definition of luxury in that they are very attuned to their customers, and their customers are young, in their 20s, travelers. And Citizen M is a Dutch hotel chain. They're now expanding in the US, and we're helping them to do that and market themselves with their first marketing campaign here. But the point I want to make about them is that they did a very deep study of what was important to their customers. They're traveling for business, they're traveling for pleasure, but they've grown up with tech. And so they knew that the app that they had to create had to be very good. You see a number of hotel chains advertising using your phone as a key. 50% of the time they don't work. And to your point, that's a broken promise, right, from a brand. So Citizen M overinvested in those touch points that were important to their customers. So their app, not only can you book your room, but check in, unlock your door, open your blinds, order food, check out. Basically, you don't even need to encounter anyone, which I know is counter to traditional luxury hospitality. But this is what this traveler wants. They want to be able to easily come in, get anything, not have to face anyone. And accordingly, the staff at a Citizen M hotel is very small, and everybody wears many hats. So they've broken the traditional hotel model, but really have made technology the focus. And I just think it's a great example of how brands need to prioritize, because there's never enough money to go around to handle every touch point, right? But if you really understand your customer, back to that empathy point, I think you can then focus on the things that are most important to them.
Chip?
Yeah, and I just found out we're doing this in 80 countries, so we may need a special translation of my Southern accent for many countries, but hopefully we can figure that out. Special translation help. You know, when you think about friction in the e-commerce space, very simple things come to mind, right? What is the friction that keeps, you between the customer, right? And what prevents that? And online friction's, simply defined, right? It's confusing navigation, it's complex filtering tools, it's long page loads, it's hard to find content, it goes on and on, right? Ineffective copy. But what you guys are talking about, empathy and understanding the customer, it is super critical in the luxury space, of course, and those are table stakes. You got to get all that right in luxury, right? It's got to be very easy to transact. But you have to remove the friction points, but you must get all that right. And then you must provide an experience that's personalized, that makes the customer feel special about one of a kind, very unique purchases. And like I said before, I feel like you've got to bring experiences that you can't get in store. You got to take it up a level. So when they do show up in store, then you can close the relationship. Before I took the role with Jedora, I was selling boats and yachts to very wealthy. One of my favorite stories, I sold $1.5 million yacht to a guy, and I said, "What are you going to do with that?" Well, he says, "I'm pulling it behind my yacht." So it was his dinghy. So I did that for a number of years, and we found that the online experience really changed our sales conversion rates because we went with 3D models of these very large crafts that sold up to $1.5 million, $2 million, so that they could design their dream. And so that was something I couldn't really replicate in the store. I could sit down and go through all the details, but they could have a 3D model and do 50 and spend hours. We found that today in online, if you have someone that spends 10 minutes with your site, that's a great experience. We would have people that spent hours and days looking at boats and designing them because they were doing something in the comfort of their home that they really couldn't do in, say, a showroom or a boat show. And I think that's very important as you move into the luxury space to say, what can I do differently online to create a great personalized experience that they may either close online or they may come into the store with lots of knowledge and want to close immediately. So I think those are the things. I think the friction pieces around e-commerce are absolute table stakes. You have to get that right. But then how do you take it to the next 3 levels and say, what are all the different tools I could bring to bear in the market to create a wow experience for the customer that they can't get anywhere else?
Thierry?
Well, real life experience, we are representing several brands, and we have a team of sales representatives, and we are going to see the stores, and we're going to take orders from the retailers. But many of our small brands in Europe are just now starting to sell online. And we see now an increase of phone calls from American consumers who are tempted to buy online. And for whatever reason, the credit card doesn't go through, they ordered, and then they have no news, where is my package? Then we step in. And my company is starting to evolve into a hybrid sort of company where we also act like concierge for those brands who are trying to sell online. And this is where the fun part comes in. We love to provide white glove service to reduce those points of friction. Real case scenario, the watch is now stuck at customs, and customs has mountains of boxes. And to make things worse, you have a watch equipped with a genuine alligator strap. And now it's in the hands of the Fish and Wildlife Administration. And you have an inspector looking at the CITES form to make sure that the strap is actually okay, and even though it's on the list of endangered species. Now, all the while, the customer is calling every day, where's my watch? Where's my watch? And we find that providing the customer with critical support, step by step, every point of friction, to us, this is really in line with providing a true luxury service. How many times every one of us have been trying to call and only to get automated robot who's trying to pitifully address your concern, if you can address your concerns at all. So back to square one, I think that all this technology that we are confronted with is fantastic. But let's not forget, we are all trying to sell luxury goods. And at the end of the day, there's someone who's taking money from their wallet to buy something, an experience. And we need to be very, very, very focused on all those issues, because otherwise you fail totally. And in this day and age of social network, your reputation goes down the drain very quickly.
Yeah, if I could follow up on your point, Thierry, I think that's 100% correct in the luxury space. And I don't think if you don't have experts available to communicate. Now we're trying to do an online only experience, but we're not doing it like Amazon, where they don't ever want to talk to a human being. We feel the importance of experts available to walk you through purchases is critical to the success, and it doesn't work without it. And I couldn't agree with you more on that point.
Yeah, I would say that in one sense you have the rise of the digital technology, who is forcing you, no matter how you feel about it, to keep up with that. So just think about a very basic example. So before 2019, most of us were on Skype or FaceTime, but not a lot of us were on Zoom. And then suddenly, everybody was on Zoom. And then after a month, the majority of us understood how to unmute ourselves during a conversation. And then we went to up to a different kind of sophistication. For instance, for women, maybe a different kind of makeup that was suggested to be used on Zoom, or how the level of the camera in front of us was supposed to be on the same height, rather than too high or too low, to avoid, let's say, an interaction that wasn't pleasant enough visually. So and then you move on, and somehow you're never happy. So you never. So there is always something that the day after not only is available, but the day after you are expecting. So in the case of Thierry, it's probably a very basic example of custom troubles that you're having, which obviously now is becoming a little bit more difficult because everything that is related to logistic is more difficult. But there is a one step before that. Technology is forcing you, with no gray area, to tell to the customer how long it's going to take to receive my watch. It's a very simple question. And technology, through the algorithm, will tell you to put a number. I don't care about the alligator. I don't care about the fish and life. I just gonna care to know now how long it's gonna take to get my watch. So now it's a very simple question, but if you make a mistake through technology, there is no way back. Then of course, not only you hope that you'll have a white glove service that Thierry was mentioned before, but you will be dead without a safety net. So rise of technology could also leave without any safety net somebody who is not willing to invest 100% on it. John.
I think the investment's key. I kind of touched on that earlier, and you also opened with the pandemic, right? And the pandemic forced a lot of luxury brands to really examine how they were going about business, especially when you have high consideration items. These are not impulse purchases. In our case, we're marketing six-figure vehicles, some of the most expensive and complicated consumer goods you can buy. And I'll give you one example of a pivot that we helped launch for Lincoln that I think was really important. Prior to the pandemic, Lincoln had a pretty extensive concierge service, 24-hour people you could talk to live, answer your questions about vehicles, guide you to a dealer. Well, when the pandemic hit and all the dealerships closed, there was nowhere for you to go to even look at a new car. And if you need a new car, your lease has ended, what are you going to do? So we helped Lincoln launch something called the Lincoln Showcase. That was a series. It was a virtual one-on-one inspection of a vehicle. So you set an appointment. They used the infrastructure of that concierge system that had already been invested in and set up, retrained the concierge to be able to hold an iPhone and help someone see the vehicle, answer their questions, show them the room in the back seat, or show them what the controls look like. And so it was the closest thing you could get while maintaining safety, right, to actually see the vehicle and then conduct, your purchase online. So it was a smart doubling down. We created marketing materials to promote it, and it was very successful. And it's something that's still continuing, as some people prefer to shop that way. Never set foot into a dealership. There's another pain point. People don't really trust car dealers. No big news there. And now Lincoln is instituting systems where you never have to set foot in a dealership. Likewise, for owners, there's something called pickup and delivery. Many regional dealers already offer this to their best customers, but Lincoln invested in a national program where every owner of a Lincoln never has to go to the dealership for servicing. You make an appointment, a valet comes to your home, drops off a Lincoln, takes your car in, and you're given back that time. I think time is an important component for every luxury customer. We talk about friction. Well, people are busy. We're all very busy. Losing 2 hours of your time to go to a dealership, drop off your vehicle, maybe wait for it, is not a good use of your time. So by giving back that time to people, Lincoln is saying, we understand you. We put a priority on your time just as you do. And I think that builds that empathy, that trust that Thierry was referring to before.
Yeah, so it seems to me that in one side, we don't want to waste a couple of hours, rightfully so. On the other, we don't know when the watch will be delivered because of fish and wildlife restrictions. So there is a bit of disconnection on it that we should address. To me, and I leave it to Chip and Thierry a comment on it, the reality is that luxury is always been reluctant to change, and we simply want to do what we know and what we used to. And the tsunami came, and that there is no escape. Now, not only if you don't do it, you cannot perform, but if you don't do it, you don't invest it with a full commitment, you're gonna be in trouble. You're gonna be left out, maybe. Chip?
Yeah, well, I'll talk a little bit about the opportunity and the size, and I think the luxury retailers are getting much more comfortable. I mean, the fear, of course, is that you lose the exclusivity and the eliteness that comes with luxury, and that's an important point, right? That's something we really have to think about. But as the digital economy is exploding, they're also looking at opportunity, and how do I make this translate in a great way that we provide amazing experiences online that get people comfortable. I think your point about the luxury car industry, nobody ever thought about buying a Porsche and Ferrari and Rolls Royce online before, but they're now doing it. And that's a considered purchase. At least it is for me. I don't know about you guys on the phone, on the call, but the market size is something we got to take a look at, right? $4.9 trillion by the end of this year. eMarketer estimates is going to be the global e-commerce platform. And that exploded, of course, during the pandemic, had really great growth. But even if you look at cooling, I was looking at a forecast on this yesterday to prepare for the call. Even as it cools coming out of the pandemic, it's still forecasted to grow to $7.5 trillion by 2025. That's more money than Joe Biden can spend. So that's a big growth. That's 53% growth. And we were sitting at 3.6 trillion in 2019. So it's doubling by 2025. So over a 4-year period, the global e-commerce is going to be massive. And the other big thing about luxury brands, for the first time, they have to start thinking about millennials because they've grown up. And millennials are really the first, millennials are 1981 to 1996. Birth, that means they are 25 to 40 years old and they're making real money for the first time. And this is a generation, I got a couple of these, my kids are in that range. And I can tell you, they can probably count on their hands and the number of times they've been in a mall in their life. They're just culturally different. Now, we grew up going to stores and visiting stores, and that's how we conducted commerce. Their life is totally different. It's online. And they're starting to make real money. My daughter's a making good money. My son is making good money, and they're starting to buy more high-end items, and they're at the low end of this, very low end of this in age range. But as you get into the 40-year-olds that are successful, that's luxury customers that grew up with the internet. They grew up buying things online. So we got to think about them, but it's also everybody. Our parent company has a product line that really focuses on 55 to 80-year-old females. Over 40% of our commerce comes from digital. Now we span the gamut of lower end to higher end goods. So you could say, hey, that's because a lot of them are lower end perhaps, but that number has been growing exponentially over the last 5 years. And so the sad truth is your grandmother is now conducting e-commerce. And so it's really cross-generational. We have the millennials that, of course, have embraced it wholeheartedly, and that's how they do their life. But, you know, I have an 80-year-old mother that has a website. She's still a realtor. She has a website. She does all of her transactions online, even fashion transactions, and is very digitally savvy. So it's not just the kids. It's not just the millennials. It's the entire marketplace. So we've got to figure out how to address them, but address them in the right way in the luxury segment. And so that's just my note on the size of the opportunity is grand. It is continuing to grow aggressively, and we have to figure out how to address the customers where they are.
Thierry.
Well, it seems to me there is a disconnect and everything is misaligned those days. If you take the examples, and our friend at Neiman Marcus will probably chuckle at that, but everyone in the industry, or all my colleagues in our trade, were conversing about the lack of professional buyers. Let me tell you a little bit more about this. It seems that the age of when department stores were really merchant, the prince of merchants, Stanley Marcus. I remember going with him in an escalator and shoppers saying, "Good morning, Mr. Marcus." They've been all replaced by accountants and, as we say, bean counters. And many of the buyers are spending their time on spreadsheets. And they are very, very adept at using technology and spreadsheets into placing their orders. But the problem I see with this is that they lose sight of the reality of the market today. And customers need to be challenged. They need to be exposed to new brands, new trends. And they seem, to me, very, very obsessed by their spreadsheet and not really paying enough attention to what is going on. Now, on the digital sphere, you have all this data that is available and allows people to really direct exactly the product where they should be and address the brand or position the brand exactly where it should be and to pinpoint on that specific clientele. I think this tool is essential, but at the same time, you need to have the emotional intelligence as opposed to just the raw intelligence given to you by the numbers. You need to feel things, you need to smell things, you need to spend time. That only you can acquire that experience by just spending time out there, observing how customers behave in front of a counter. I think this is key. And how do you reconcile this need for very, very sharp tools, technological tools, reaching out to this new clientele, to this new generation? And I totally agree with you. They don't want to wear the jewelry that their grandmother was wearing. They want new, exciting stuff. I think COVID is akin to a world war. Before World War I, after World War I, before World War II, after World War II, fashion was totally different. There was the roaring 20s, even though it led to depression and war. But I think we're living through exciting times, extremely exciting times. You have a world of opportunities for brand. And what I just wanted to say is that the challenge is that a small, true luxury brands who only produce 500 watches a year for very, very specific collectors or connoisseurs is very different from a huge behemoth a watch company that produces millions of watches. But there are some underlying principles, and you need to embrace technology. You need to be very adept at it. I'm telling all my friends in Switzerland to wake up. Many of them thought that Apple would never be able to sell a watch. And now Apple is selling more watches than anyone else in the industry. So that was only, what, 5 years ago? I was chuckling because people were saying things as if they knew exactly what was going to happen, and no one really knows. I think that we are living in very fast changing times. You need to be extremely adept. You need to be extremely cognizant of the new reality, understand the customer, spend a lot of time smelling the air. I think it's very important.
Very good. We have 3 minutes left, so I think we're gonna skip my last question. We go to the final takeaway that I promised to the audience on the beginning of my introduction. John, what's the takeaway for the audience in 30 seconds?
I can't believe we're skipping the best question. No, just kidding. This is so rich, right? And 3 minutes is almost a travesty because I think we've got so much to say. But the things that Chip and Thierry that you brought up very much resonate with me. The emotional intelligence is key. You know, I think the challenge for all the brands is to lean into the tech that's available, make things seamless and effortless, and then find that way to convey the true DNA of the brand, right? And you look at brands like Burberry, we've used them as an example over and over, but they're brilliant in the way that they embrace technology, they lean into their core attributes, and yet they've expanded it to a whole new audience. I saw a post from Mercedes this morning on Instagram, and they're celebrating 100 years of the star. And images flash past it. You see the star shaved into someone's head. You see the star on fire, right? I mean, just a few years ago, this would be sacrilege, right? To do that to the mark of your brand. And yet, to points all of you have made, luxury brands need to look at what are the millennials valuing? What is tomorrow's customer looking at? And be able to kind of topple some of those rules from the past to embrace a new way forward. I'll let my fellow panelists speak.
Chips, take away.
You know, and I've taken the digital angle, and I would say that the key for our audience is to place your focus on developing experiences that are different than in-person sales. Leverage all the tools that you have online to provide things you just cannot deliver face-to-face, because you'll never replicate a face-to-face engagement. So the failure is to try. What the opportunity is to do something different, maybe even better, but different. You know, in-depth schematics, storytelling through video, customer testimonials, wider selection availability, customization, things that you can do that you can't necessarily do in store, I think are key. And then back it all up with amazing customer service and salespeople that can answer any question at any time and take you to the next level. Because in the luxury space, you cannot go without the touch here. But digital can get you halfway there, and then you can knock it over. You know, in terms of, you know, if I had from a digital experience, if I had, you know, kind of 2 things to walk away with, it's invest right now in a test and learn culture. There's no such thing as the right answer. Every brand and every product is different. But if you have a test and learn culture, you'll get better and better all the time. And hire the right research and UX people to help you develop deep understanding of the customer so that you can deliver new experiences, whether those are online or in store.
Very good. Thierry?
Well, my takeaway is be authentic, be yourself. All the brands we represent, we feel like we're an art gallery that represent different artists. It's each with its own personality, its own history. We believe that maybe they will be the Picasso of the next 20 years. We're very proud to represent Italian brands from Lamborghini or U-Boat in Florence, fantastic brands, and Anonimo. Yeah. So we have many, I don't want to make too much publicity, but Italian brands have that. They have this personality, this authenticity, this passion for quality. this pride in their history. And I think that all those elements are fundamental constituents of what luxury is all about. And the customers, new customers, will not take any BS. They really are looking for authenticity. And this is my take on the situation.
Thank you all. Grazie, merci.